The depths of the ocean have always held a mysterious allure for adventurers and thrill seekers. But beneath the surface lies a world as dangerous as it is beautiful. On September 10, 2002, a group of friends went diving on Bay of Pogan. One of them was Miroslav Kuklis, a 31-year-old cook from the Czech Republic who now lived in Croatia. They were having a great time on their boat, enjoying the views and planning to dive. That afternoon, Miroslav decided to go for a dive by himself. He put on his gear and went into the water alone. This choice would lead to a terrible tragedy. As Miroslav swam around, he found what looked like a cave entrance. It was about 30 feet underwater and 6.5 feet wide. Miroslav was good at diving, but he usually played it safe. Today, though, he decided to take a risk. He swam into the cave. As he went deeper, the cave got wider. After about 50 feet, he saw two different passages, one shallow, one deep. The cave floor was covered in powdery silt. Miroslav knew if he wasn't careful, he could stir it up and not be able to see. Luckily, Miroslav made it back to the surface safely. But as soon as he was back on the boat, he had a dangerous idea. If he made it out okay once, why not go back? As night fell, the group had dinner and drinks. Miroslav told his friends about the amazing cave he'd found. They argued about whether they should all explore it together. Some thought it was too risky, especially at night. But as they drank more, they got more excited about the idea. They decided to go for it, not knowing how much they'd regret it. 4 divers, including Miroslav, got ready and went into the water. The boat crew and captain stayed behind. Miroslav led the way to the cave, showing them the 2 passages he'd found earlier. As they explored the deep passage, they realized the cave was much bigger and more complicated than they thought. They wisely decided to cut their dive short, planning to spend just 15 more minutes looking at sea life near the entrance, before going back up. Around 10:30 p.m., 3 of the divers got back to the boat. But when they climbed on board, they realized something terrible. Miroslav wasn't with them. The crew hadn't seen him either. Everyone started to worry. At 10:46 p.m., a crew member and another experienced diver went back into the water to look for Miroslav. They searched the cave and the area around it for almost an hour, but found nothing. When they got back to the boat at 11:41 p.m., everyone knew the awful truth. If Miroslav was still in the water, he would have run out of air long ago. Things had gone from bad to worse. At 12:15 a.m., almost 3 hours after they first went into the water, the captain finally called the Croatian police. What started as an exciting adventure had turned into a nightmare. The next morning, 2 police divers went down to search the cave. They made it to the split between the 2 passages, but then disaster struck again. One of the divers got separated from his safety line and disappeared into the dark. His partner, scared and using up his air fast, barely made it back to the surface. Now, with 2 missing divers possibly in different parts of the cave, the rescue got even harder. More divers came to help. They quickly found the body of the police diver about 80 feet inside the shallow passage. But they couldn't find Miroslav. It wasn't until they reached the bottom of the cave, 177 feet down, that they made a shocking discovery. They found Miroslav's body still in his diving gear. His mask was gone, and his breathing tube was out of his mouth. But what really shocked the rescue divers was the large knife sticking out of his chest. This raised more questions than it answered. Was Miroslav murdered? If so, by who and why? The investigation that followed uncovered a bunch of confusing clues and conflicting theories. Investigators carefully checked all the diving equipment used that night. The dive computers, which record important information like how deep divers go and how long they stay underwater, were all working perfectly. This was important because the data from dive computers can't be changed or erased, so it gave a reliable timeline of what happened. An autopsy showed that the knife had gone about 4.5 inches into Miroslav's chest, piercing his heart. Shockingly, this terrible wound didn't kill him right away. He might have stayed alive for up to 2 minutes, during which time he breathed in a lot of seawater. tests also showed that Miroslav had a lot of alcohol in his blood, more than twice the legal limit for driving in Croatia. As the investigation went on, police came up with a few possible explanations for Miroslav's death. The first idea was that someone had attacked him in the cave. But investigators thought that if it was murder, there would have been easier and safer ways to do it than fighting with a knife in an underwater cave at night. The second idea was that Miroslav had been killed on the boat and then taken to the cave after he was already dead. But this didn't make sense either. There was no damage to his ears, which would have happened if a dead body was taken so deep underwater. Also, the data from the dive computers didn't match up with this idea. A third possibility was that the rescue divers had found Miroslav alive, but confused and panicking. In that state, he might have grabbed at his rescuers so hard that they got scared and used the knife to protect themselves. But the dive computers showed that the rescue attempt started long after Miroslav's device had stopped working at the bottom of the deep passage. As investigators put all the evidence together, they came up with a chilling but possible explanation. Like other divers before him, Miroslav had probably gotten lost in the cave, thinking the entrance to the shallow passage was the way out. He was already affected by alcohol, and nitrogen narcosis would have made his thinking even more confused. Realizing he was lost, Miroslav probably panicked and made a series of bad decisions that only made things worse. He might have swum around the shallow passage for about 30 minutes before finding a way to the deep passage. But by this time, he was almost out of air. With no other options, Miroslav might have swum to the top of the deep passage where he stopped and thought about what to do. Facing the idea of a slow, painful death by drowning, he might have made the desperate choice to end his suffering quickly with his dive knife. This theory, while horrible, matches other cases where people facing certain painful deaths have done similar things to avoid suffering. Also, Miroslav had reportedly told other divers more than once that nothing scared him more than drowning. We might never know exactly what happened to Miroslav in the dark depths of the Bay of Pogan cave. But his tragic story reminds us how unforgiving underwater exploration can be. The thrill of exploring the unknown must always be balanced against the very real possibility of disaster. Have you ever had a close call while diving or exploring? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story has touched you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And remember, stay safe out there, because sometimes the greatest danger is the one we don't see coming.